Daniel Carter was the cop everyone trusted. Lily Marston was the neighbor no one really knew. Their love story seemed picture-perfect, until one of them ended up dead in the woods, and the other's identity turned out to be a lie. This is the chilling true crime case of how a decorated officer fell for the woman next door and walked straight into a deadly trap. Springfield had always been the kind of town people dreamed of settling down in, safe, quiet, and just far enough from the city to avoid the chaos, but close enough to visit when needed. The streets were lined with maple trees, their leaves turning golden in the fall, and kids still played outside until the porch lights came on. It was a place where people didn't lock their doors at night, where everyone waved at each other, and where gossip moved faster than the mail. So, when Officer Daniel Carter moved into the modest two-story house on Elmwood Drive, people noticed. Daniel had transferred from the city after nearly a decade in the vice unit. He said he needed a change, that the city had worn him down, and he looked the part. Sharp jawline, short-cropped hair, always in a crisp uniform or fitted civilian clothes. He carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who had seen too much but still believed in doing good. To the neighbors, he was a breath of fresh air. Polite, helpful, quick to offer a hand with groceries or wave at passing kids on their bikes. Many on the block felt safer just knowing he lived there. His presence brought a sense of security but also a curiosity. Everyone wanted to know more about him, why he'd really left the city, why he lived alone, and most importantly, who he might be dating. It didn't take long for the neighborhood to find a focus for their speculation. Lily Marston, the woman next door. Lily had moved in about 8 months earlier, long before Daniel arrived. She kept to herself, rarely attended block parties, and was usually seen behind a camera lens or working in her small backyard garden. She was beautiful in a subtle, effortless way, and there was something about her quiet demeanor that made people wonder. No one knew much about her background, just that she was a photographer who worked freelance, mostly online, and that she had moved from out of state. Some thought she might be recovering from a bad relationship or perhaps hiding from one. At first, Daniel and Lily only exchanged polite nods and brief small talk over the fence, but soon, they were spotted taking walks together, grabbing coffee or sitting side by side on her porch late in the evening. Their connection seemed genuine, even sweet. But there was something else, something unspoken that made certain neighbors uneasy. Maybe it was how quickly their relationship grew, or maybe it was the way Daniel, normally so open, became more withdrawn after spending time with her. He stopped attending department barbecues. He missed a few calls from close friends. One officer even mentioned that Daniel had started carrying a second phone, one he didn't list on any official records. Small things, easy to overlook on their own, but together they painted a picture of a man becoming increasingly cautious. No one could have guessed that Daniel Carter, disciplined, dependable, always in control, was stepping into a story that would end in betrayal, heartbreak, and murder. And it all began on a quiet street in a perfect little town, where nothing bad was supposed to happen. As spring settled over Springfield, the relationship between Daniel and Lily seemed to bloom right along with it. Neighbors grew used to seeing the two together, running early in the mornings through the tree-lined streets, eating lunch on her porch, or sharing quiet evenings with wine and flickering candlelight. To outsiders, it looked like a classic small-town romance, a respected cop falling for the mysterious woman next door. But behind the smiles and stolen glances, something wasn't sitting right, especially with one person who knew Daniel better than anyone else. Melissa Warren had been Daniel's girlfriend for nearly 4 years before they broke things off. Like him, she worked in law enforcement, and like him, she took her job seriously. The breakup had been mutual, or so it seemed. But the truth was, Melissa had always sensed Daniel was haunted by something from his past, something he never talked about. When he suddenly transferred out of the city and moved to Springfield, She knew there had to be more to the story. And now, watching him cozy up to Lily Marston, she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. Melissa wasn't the only one who noticed changes. At the station, Daniel's behavior had subtly shifted. He was still sharp, still dependable, but there was a certain tension in his eyes now. He'd started showing up early and staying late, but not for work. He'd often be sitting alone in the break room, scrolling through his phone or scribbling notes in a small black notebook he never let out of his sight. His focus seemed divided. He was always alert but distracted at the same time, like he was constantly watching something that no one else could see. Then came the odd request. Daniel quietly approached someone in internal affairs with a question. Could they look up Lily Marston and see if she had any kind of sealed record or connection to any federal investigations? The request was rejected as it fell outside any formal case. But it didn't go unnoticed. Word got around. Why was Daniel digging into his girlfriend's past? When asked about it, Daniel brushed it off, saying he just wanted to be sure of who he was getting involved with. But those close to him weren't convinced. It wasn't like him to investigate someone without a reason. Something about Lily was bothering him. But he wouldn't say what. Then, things escalated. Daniel's house was broken into in the middle of the night. The lock hadn't been forced and nothing valuable was taken, except for the fact that his personal laptop had been moved. It wasn't missing, just clearly tampered with. Files were opened. Some had been deleted. Daniel reported the incident but refused to elaborate on the details. The official story was that it was probably a kid or a neighbor who got curious. But Daniel didn't believe that. He changed his locks the next day. He also bought a security system, despite always saying he didn't need one. And perhaps the biggest change of all, Lily shut down her photography blog without warning. Her social media accounts disappeared overnight. When asked, she simply said she wanted a break from the digital world. But the timing was suspicious. Daniel grew quieter. His smiles became rare. And deep down he seemed to know something was coming. Something he couldn't stop. It was the kind of rainy Friday that wrapped the whole town in silence. Clouds hung low over the streets, and the steady sound of water tapping on rooftops filled the air. At the Springfield Police Department, the morning shift moved along as usual, until someone noticed Daniel Carter wasn't there. At first, no one thought much of it. Maybe he overslept. Maybe he was sick. But by mid-morning, when calls and texts went unanswered, the concern grew. He was known for his punctuality, for showing up even on his days off. Silence wasn't like him. By noon, his supervisor asked Officer Melissa Warren to check on him. She didn't hesitate. As she pulled up to his house on Elmwood Drive, everything appeared normal. His black SUV sat in the driveway, windows fogged from the damp weather. The mailbox was still full. She knocked on the front door. No answer. She rang the bell, called his phone again. Still nothing. When she tried the handle, it was locked. She circled around back, tapping on the windows, calling his name. Eventually, a locksmith was brought in. The door opened into a quiet, still house. Nothing looked out of place. Dishes sat neatly in the rack, lights were off, and the faint scent of coffee still lingered in the kitchen. Upstairs, the bedroom was untouched. The bed was made. Daniel's phone charger was still plugged in. But something caught Melissa's eye almost immediately. His service weapon, which he always kept in a drawer by the bed, was gone. She noticed a smear of something dark along the wall outside the bathroom. Upon closer inspection, it was blood. Just a faint streak, but enough to send a chill through her. The trail led to the attic stairs. She climbed up slowly, flashlight in hand, heart pounding. The attic was empty. No signs of a struggle. Just an open window at the far end, dripping with rainwater. Muddy footprints led across the attic floor and out the window onto the roof. From there, the trail was faint but visible. Footprints on the roof tiles, then along the edge of the garage next door, Lily Marston's property. Officers were dispatched to check her home. She answered the door calmly, claiming she hadn't seen Daniel in a couple of days. She said they'd argued earlier in the week and decided to take some space. Her tone was flat, her expression unreadable. A search of her home revealed nothing unusual. That evening, a call came in from a hiker on the outskirts of Springfield. They'd found a man's body in the woods, near the edge of the old quarry. Officers rushed to the scene. There, lying face down in the mud, was Officer Daniel Carter. He'd been shot twice in the chest. His badge lay a few feet away, half buried in the dirt. His wallet and ID were still on him, untouched. No signs of a struggle. It looked like he'd walked or been led into the woods and executed. The department was stunned. An officer murdered, with no immediate leads, and the only clue pointing toward a neighbor who barely reacted. A storm of questions followed, but one thing was clear. Daniel had suspected something. And now he was gone. The town of Springfield was shaken to its core. A well-respected officer found murdered in the woods behind his own home. It was the kind of crime that didn't belong in a place like this. Candlelight vigils formed outside the police department. News vans lined the streets. But beneath the public mourning, behind closed doors, investigators were scrambling to uncover the truth. And at the center of it all stood one quiet, unassuming woman, Lily Marston. Lily was brought in for further questioning the day after Daniel's body was discovered. She stuck to her story. She hadn't seen him in days, they'd argued, and she assumed he needed space. Her calmness was unsettling. There were no signs of panic, no visible grief. She didn't ask about the investigation or seem interested in the results of the autopsy. To detectives, it didn't make sense. If their relationship had been as close as neighbors believed, why wasn't she more emotional? As suspicion grew, Officer Melissa Warren took it upon herself to dig deeper. She still couldn't accept that Daniel's death had come out of nowhere. He had known something was wrong, she was sure of it. She started by looking into Lily's background. What she found didn't add up. For someone living in the digital age, Lily had very little traceable history. No family connections, no college records, no past addresses before Springfield. Her photography website had vanished, and even cached versions of it contained almost nothing personal, just vague bios and artistic photos. Frustrated, Melissa reached out to a contact in Chicago's federal court system. It took days of quiet back-channel communication, but the pieces finally came together. Lily Marston didn't exist before a year ago. Her real name was Alicia Wynn. 5 years earlier, she had testified in a massive federal case against the Grey Sun Syndicate, a brutal gang tied to trafficking, extortion, and multiple murders. Alicia had been a key witness. She had taken photos of a private meeting between gang members and corrupt officials, evidence that helped bring down a large part of the organization. As a result, she was placed in the Witness Protection Program. Her new identity, location, and even profession were carefully chosen to blend into small-town life. The strange part? Daniel Carter had once worked undercover during the early phases of that same investigation. It was entirely possible he didn't recognize her at first. But if he did, it explained everything. Why he started acting paranoid, why he requested a background check, and why he installed extra security around his home. The most troubling part was what this revelation suggested. Someone else might have found out who Alicia, now Lily, really was. Someone who wanted her silence, or revenge. The theory gained weight when footage surfaced from a gas station security camera. Just 2 nights before his death, Daniel had met with a man in a black hoodie. The footage was too grainy to identify him, but his limp was noticeable. The same limp belonged to Rico Marquez, a former Grayson enforcer, and one of the only high-ranking members never caught during the original case. Now it seemed clear, Daniel had been getting too close to the truth, and someone had come back to finish what had started years before. With Daniel gone and Lily's true identity exposed, the investigation took on a new urgency. The question was no longer just who had killed Daniel Carter, it was why, and how deep the conspiracy went. Investigators began retracing every step Daniel had taken in the final weeks of his life. What emerged was a disturbing picture of a man who had realized far too late that the woman he'd fallen for was connected to the darkest chapter of his past. The key break in the case came when an anonymous tip directed police to a rundown motel just outside of town. Officers arrived at room 12 and forced the door open. Inside they found the missing weapon, Daniel's service pistol, wrapped in a towel and hidden beneath the floorboards. The room was otherwise bare except for a duffel bag filled with cash, burner phones, and forged IDs. In the corner of the room sat Rico Marquez. Rico had been off the grid for years, presumed either dead or permanently in hiding. A former top enforcer for the Grey Sun Syndicate, he had vanished after the trials, escaping arrest by slipping across the border under a false identity. Now, he was back. Under questioning, he confessed to the murder. But his version of events was more complex than anyone expected. He claimed Lily, Alicia, had contacted him weeks earlier. She'd somehow discovered he was still alive and reached out saying she was in danger. She told him that Daniel had figured out who she was and had threatened to expose her. According to Rico, she begged for protection, saying the authorities would abandon her if her identity became public. She feared Daniel might leak her location, either on purpose or by accident. Whether that was true or not, Rico said he agreed to meet Daniel. What happened in the woods was brief and brutal. Daniel came alone. Rico said there were no threats, no arguments, just a short, tense conversation before he pulled the trigger twice and walked away. He claimed Lily hadn't known he planned to kill Daniel. She only wanted to feel safe, but the evidence said otherwise. Phone records showed Lily had called Rico multiple times in the days leading up to the murder. GPS data revealed she'd driven out to the motel at least once. And when investigators checked her laptop, they found deleted messages and encrypted files, many containing surveillance photos of Daniel, taken without his knowledge. Faced with this evidence, Lily was arrested and charged as an accessory to murder. In court, she remained quiet, showing little emotion. She never explained why she really reached out to Rico or what she thought would happen. Her lawyers painted her as a frightened woman trapped between two dangerous men. The prosecution argued she had manipulated both, sacrificing the man who loved her to protect herself. In the end, Lily received a 12-year sentence. Rico was handed a life sentence without parole. The story left Springfield shaken. The image of a devoted police officer, unknowingly walking into a trap set by someone he trusted, haunted the department for years. Daniel Carter died trying to uncover the truth. In doing so, he exposed a lie that had been hiding in plain sight, and paid the ultimate price for falling in love with the wrong person.